A Woman of Paris was a courageous step in the career of Charles Chaplin. After 70 films in which he himself had appeared in every scene, he now directed a picture in which he merely walked on for a few seconds as an unbilled and unrecognizable extra, a porter at a railroad station. Until this time, too, every film had been a comedy, but A Woman of Paris was a romantic drama. This was not a sudden impulse. For a long time, Chaplin had wanted to try his hand at directing a serious film. The inspiration for A Woman of Paris finally came from three women. First was Edna Purviance, who had been his ideal partner in more than 35 films. Now, though, he felt that Edna was growing too mature for comedy, so he decided to make a film that would launch her on a new career as a dramatic actress. At this moment, his life was invaded by the second of the women, Peggy Hopkins Joyce. Peggy was not a woman of Paris, but a barber's daughter from Virginia. She was, however, very pretty and had made an extremely profitable career of marrying and divorcing millionaires. No doubt she now intended to add Chaplin to her list of rich conquests. Instead, it was Chaplin who profited from Peggy. He was fascinated by her colourful stories, how she'd been the mistress of a rich Parisian publisher and how a young man had killed himself for love of her. He listened and stored up the stories, and Peggy and her love life were transformed into the character of Marie St. Clair, Chaplin's Woman of Paris. The third inspiration for the film was the glamorous and temperamental Polish-born actress Pola Negri, who had just arrived in Hollywood. Very soon, Charlie and Pola embarked on a tempestuous love affair, which was gleefully reported, with all its dramatic ups and downs, by the world's press. Two things about this affair with Pola were exceptional in Chaplin's life. The first was that the affair became so public, though ordinarily he was at pains to keep his private life out of the news. The second peculiarity of the affair was that this was the only occasion on which Chaplin permitted himself to mix work and private life. Normally, when he was at work, he had time and thought for nothing else, and certainly not for romance. But the Pola affair was different. It coincided exactly with the production of the film. Charlie and Pola met when Chaplin was in the final stages of preparation for the film, and they separated for good 3 days after he had completed shooting. With such perfect timing, it is tempting to speculate whether this was a real love affair, or whether, however unconsciously, Chaplin was seeking in Pola the model he needed for the kind of sophisticated woman of the world who was hard to find in Hollywood. At first sight, the story might seem like conventional melodrama. Look again and you see how Chaplin has overturned all the stereotypes of the time. The heroine is, frankly, a courtesan. The hero is a mother-dominated weakling. The bad guy, on the contrary, is charming, considerate, and amusing. Hollywood at that time revered mothers and fathers, but here the parents are bigoted and selfish, and the cause of all the tragedy. With A Woman of Paris, Chaplin inaugurated a whole new style of comedy of manners and new styles of acting to suit it. His own genius as a comic actor lay in his observation of human behaviour. Now he applied his discoveries to serious drama, exploring ways of revealing the inner workings of his characters' hearts and minds through their external actions and expressions. He found ideal interpreters in the brilliant Adolphe Menjou and in Edna Purviance with her long experience of working with Chaplin. They play their roles with miraculous subtlety and an understatement that was unprecedented at this time. Chaplin made a profound comment on his discoveries and on the whole art of the best screen acting. As I have noticed, he said, men and women try to hide their emotions rather than try and express them, and that is the method I have pursued to become as realistic as possible. The press was ecstatic. Neither Chaplin nor anyone else had ever received such unanimous praise for a film, but alas, the audience did not share the enthusiasm of the critics. Never had a Chaplin film done such bad business. It seemed that people were not prepared to pay their cents to see a film in which their idol did not appear. Few even recognized him in his bit part as the porter, though these few seconds were a high spot wherever the film was shown. At the very end of his life, Chaplin tried again with the film. At 86 years old, aided by the arranger Eric James, he created and recorded a new musical score. It was to be his last time in a film studio, and the final work in an astonishing creative life that had spanned 8 decades. Perhaps, too, it was a kind of reconciliation with a film which the public had rejected, though he himself remained intensely and justifiably proud of it.
A Woman of Paris was made in 1922. It was Charlie Chaplin's first production for United Artists, which he had founded 3 years earlier with Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, and D.W. Griffith. Chaplin was then 33 and had long considered the idea of directing a dramatic motion picture. The story concerns two young people engaged to one another and who, separated by a cruel twist of fate, meet again in Paris a few years later. Though Jean has remained faithful to his artistic aspirations, Marie has become the mistress of a debonair but cynical man about town, Pierre. Chaplin immediately saw this film as a watershed in his career, so that's why for once he decided to put aside his beloved tramp costume and not act in the film. Edna Purviance, who was his real-life companion and his partner in half of his earlier films, played the female lead. Chaplin based the film's story on the confidences of a certain Peggy Hopkins Joyce.
The term gold digger was coined in honor of Peggy around 1920.
A dancer friend of Peggy's, herself one of the Ziegfeld girls.
After she divorced her first millionaire with $1 million settlement, she became a Ziegfeld girl, from which strategic launching she went on to net, believe it or not, 4 more millionaire husbands in rapid succession. In 1922, she arrived in Hollywood, bent on a film career. When she visited Charlie's studio, he was intrigued by this former country girl and self-made woman of the world. They were inseparable for a couple of weeks. They even took a trip to Catalina Island. And Hollywood gossip marked Chaplin as Peggy's 6th conquest. But Peggy was soon to realize that Charlie was not to become one of her more profitable ventures and moved on to more promising quarry. It was Charlie who gained from the liaison, which he was to describe as bizarre but brief. Peggy had given him the idea for his next film.
Originally, Chaplin intended to call his film Public Opinion and then Destiny. He even considered a good dozen other titles before settling on A Woman of Paris, making it clear that his film was in no way intended as a satire of the American way of life. Still, when the film was released in 1923, the public stayed away and several states banned it on grounds of immorality. 80 years on, A Woman of Paris, an unjustly underrated film, represents an important milestone in the history of motion pictures and remains a benchmark for many filmmakers.
I can tell you exactly what I remember. It must have been 1923 or 4. I knew quite a lot about films, but only in a very superficial and the way the ordinary public thinks about films. And then I saw that Chaplin had made a film in which he wasn't appearing, called A Woman of Paris, and I was absolutely knocked flat, because suddenly the whole medium grew up before my eyes. Nobody had ever really done any realistic films at all before. Suddenly here was a grown-up film with people behaving as they do in life, about the film which were really, in a way, innocent. But it's a progenitor, obviously, of Monsieur Verdoux later on, but it's a much more grown-up film than Verdoux. But still, I was only 18, and the cinema had seemed to me up to then something quite different. Suddenly, it grew up and I grew up. And it's directly responsible for my own rather over-serious attitude to making films.
You know, when I listen to Michael Powell, I agree with him in many ways. This is a grown-up film, and it is very real. It has more realism, this film, than many films that are made today. Well, from the point of view, very seldom, I would think, in these days, maybe it's the first time it's done, to show the reality of life while we, the audience, and the two main characters of the movie are watching from the window. I like that a lot.
Montabelle was for years one of Chaplin's favorite assistants.
In his new film, I heard him say he wanted to explore the limits of the expressiveness he'd experienced through 8 years of film work. The range, the subtlety, and the sophistication of the sentiments and motives that could be revealed in picture.
Like Bertolt Brecht did, you know. You show one side of a person and then you show the other side, and that is what makes a person interesting.
During Chaplin's brief liaison with Peggy Hopkins Joyce, Peggy had pointed out in a restaurant Adolphe Menjou, the actor, as having the perfect Parisian style. And as I was friendly with Menjou, I recommended him to Charlie.
I discovered that Chaplin had the habit of lunching on Hollywood Boulevard at Armstrong Carlston's or at Musso and Frank's.
Menjou was one of the few actors of French origin in Hollywood at the time.
I made a point of arriving for lunch at the same restaurant and the same times as Chaplin, always wearing an elegant outfit I reckoned would give the impression of a boulevardier. Lot enough for Chaplin to hear for fresh escargot in white wine sauce. Either this play acting or a reel of one of my films persuaded Chaplin to interview me at last. This in itself was unusual, cause Chaplin usually hated to interview actors because he felt so bad afterwards if he could not give them the job. He seemed to find me okay for the part.
Chaplin, he's a male man, and the way he looked at women, I think, is very often from the male way of seeing women. But in this movie, he went in with great interest and looked at women. There are two main characters there, the mother of the artist and Mary, the woman whose destiny we follow, and they do change, and he cares about them, and he shows their good sides. He follows why they are good, why they make good choices, and at the same time he shows very negative things with them. He shows the mother, you know, crying to make her son make very bad choices, giving the son guilt, so he will deny the woman he wants to marry.
I remember shooting began on November 27th, 1922, and continued for 7 months. You know, even in this elaborate feature, Chaplin worked without a script. It's a fact which already surprised commentators at the time. But in fact, by the time he came to shoot the film, the scenario, worked out over the preceding months in masses of notes, was so precise in Chaplin's mind that a normal screenplay would have been superfluous, even a distraction. And it shows that Chaplin, once on the set, worked with confidence and precision. We had a basic idea of the story. Then we would do the incident every day. We'd shoot for 3 or 4 days, then lay off for 2 weeks and rewrite and perfect it and rehearse it and rarefy it. Charlie had the patience of Job. Nothing was too much trouble. A real perfectionist.
I understand he had no script. He didn't make a script. He knew what he wanted to tell, and then he told the story from the beginning to the end. And even though maybe scene number 2 is in her bedroom and scene number 6 is in her bedroom, he didn't do number 2 in the bedroom and number 6 in the bedroom at the same time. Oh no, he did scene 3, 4, 5. And then he went back to the bedroom, which is a very expensive way of doing the story, but it's also great for the actors, great for the cinematographer, great for the storytelling, specifically if you don't have a script. He gives himself material by shooting this way, and I wish we could do movies this way today, but we can't. Movies today are industrial, you know. You look at the cost first and then at the art. And I know as a director, very often it's things I would really like to do. And it's always what will it cost against what would it give the movie. And it's very difficult to explain what it will give a movie. So the cost will most often win. But if you are Charlie Chaplin, of course, he's discussing with himself. He was making this movie with his own company, and it's his own discussion.
Not until we started shooting did I begin to realize that we were making a novel and exciting picture. He had one wonderful, unforgettable line that he kept repeating over and over throughout the picture. "Don't sell it," he would say. "Remember, they're picking at you."
That's fantastic. I'm going to use that when I'm going to direct again. And you can see it with these actors. This is in a time long before people had learned in movies to act very natural. A stupid director would then make her, being a masseuse, do very hard on the woman that she despises and whatever. No, she does her masseusing thing very right in the way it should be. It's just in the expression of her face. And this is where he is a great storyteller, where he's a great actor's director, and his imagery. And maybe some of this imagery today may seem, oh, we've seen it before. Sure, we've seen some of it before. But this was in 1922, when no one had made features films like this. This is the first time. It's like when you see Ingmar Bergman's Persona. Today, yes, it doesn't have that same thing because so many people have copied it in different ways. But when you do it for the first time, it is incredible. And many things in this movie is done for the first time, and it probably hasn't been done better.
That effect was done in 8 takes only. Hey, did you notice that Charlie makes a brief appearance in that scene as a clumsy porter?
I liked what this movie shows towards the end, when it's fade in and fade out from scenes, what is happening at the same time. And this is when Marie has told her lover, number 2, Pierre, it's over. And lover number 2, who smiles, what does he care? And does he really care? And it shows through a long night what happens with Pierre and what happens with her. It's fade in and fade out, and it's happening at the same time for both of them. So it's like, it's the page of a picture.
Openings in Los Angeles and New York on October 1st of the same year. And, unusually, Chaplin addressed audiences in a brief and surprising note, distributed at the doors of movie theaters.
No doubt, while you're waiting, I can have a little heart-to-heart talk with you. I've been thinking that the public wants a little more realism in pictures, whereby a story is pursued to the logical ending. I would like to get your ideas on the subject, for I'm sure that those of us who are producing pictures do not know. We only guess. In my first serious drama...
Well, Chaplin did write a letter for premiere, to the audience. I really don't know what you will feel about my picture, and this is what I wanted to say, but maybe I'm wrong, but you are the viewers, you are the audience, so whatever you feel is right. It's almost, begging for forgiveness, like he's doing something wrong with his film. And I think maybe that is very much part of an actor, that as an actor you are used to applause, or you're used to recognition of what you do, and he couldn't bear to be unloved, unapplauded. You need it. And the sad thing is, this movie was not a success when it was shown. It was a kind of flop. And I think only today will we really recognize how marvelous it is, how good it is. And you watch it and you don't feel you are back in 1922. You just see a different way of making films, but it's made by a genius.
Moment of the time. However, if I have failed in my effort to entertain you, I feel it will be my loss. Nevertheless, I enjoyed making it, and sincerely hope you will enjoy seeing it. Sincerely, Charles Chaplin.